Hey, what's up, guys? So, Hermen Hulst had a interview recently, and he went over pretty much the future of PlayStation. And honestly, there's a lot of things that he said that I found very interesting, so I want to share my thoughts on them. So, if you end up enjoying the video, drop it a like, and if you want to stay up to date on the latest PlayStation news, make sure you subscribe. So we're going to be reading from Axios.com, and the headline reads, "PlayStation to broaden lineup, but won't abandon roots," studio chief says. Sony PlayStation is diversifying the types of games it makes, but will not neglect its core strength of single-player narrative adventures, PlayStation Studios chief Hermen Hulst tells Axios. Why it matters. Winning gaming hardware generations by selling the most consoles is no longer enough for PlayStation. While it entered a new console cycle with the 2020 launch of the PlayStation 5, Sony has also begun expanding into PC and mobile development. What they're saying, quote, "We have a history and a reputation for building these incredible narrative-driven single-player games, such as The Last of Us and Horizon and the upcoming God of War Ragnarok." The PlayStation Studios head is centrally located to orchestrate expansion efforts, coordinating the work of some 4,000 developers across 19 studios from Japan to California. Quote, "We're also diversifying now, and we have stood up 12 projects in total in the live ops multiplayer space," unquote. Live ops or live service games are usually multiplayer and designed for years of post-release content that can generate additional revenue. Live games such as Epic's Fortnite and EA's Apex Legends are among the industry's biggest hits, but Sony has had scant success in the category. Most of Sony's live games haven't been announced yet and are deep in development. They'll come from newly acquired teams such as Haven Studios, partners such as Firewalk, and even Sony's internal teams that are best known for single-player games, Hulst says. They won't all be original intellectual property, Hulst says, quote, "We're not excluding bringing some of our beloved existing franchises into live games," unquote. Traditional PlayStation fans shouldn't fret. The blockbuster single-player narrative games Sony regularly wins awards for aren't going away. Many of Sony's top developers like making them and will continue to do so, the studio chief says. Quote, "Some of our biggest titles in the single-player narrative-driven space are also our most profitable titles," unquote. Sony is also courting PC and mobile markets. The latter is nearly double console and global revenue, according to research firm Newzoo. On PC, it has released 4 former PlayStation 4 games to robust sales, with more coming. Mobile is going slower with no titles announced but obvious ambition. Hulst says Sony plans to build up its internal capability to make mobile games. Will work with external partners and refers to recently purchased Savage Game Studios as Sony's first acquisition for its mobile group. Sony may also still make games for the PS4 despite only having PS5 exclusive console games announced beyond 2022. Quote, "We certainly don't want to forget the millions of active players on PS4, and we want to ensure there are great games for all of them. We're evaluating it on a case-by-case basis," unquote. Sony's moves come as costs rise for creating blockbuster games. Quote, "Most of the bigger teams have grown in recent years," unquote. Bringing titles to PC for additional sales has helped. Quote, "It allows us to continue to invest even deeper into their projects," unquote. Scrutiny over how blockbuster games are made has intensified as well. Numerous investigative reports about the industry in recent years described overworked developers crunching long hours to an unhealthy degree, including at flagship Sony studio Naughty Dog. Quote, "I want to look at our professionals as people that can have balanced long-term careers with proper career progression," unquote. Hulst says his teams are trying to tackle the issue with nuance. He floated that an experienced art director might decide they want to work a Saturday to polish something. Quote, "Am I going to say no? Well, it's a bit more complex because what if his entire team then feels obliged to also go in? So what that means is that we need to have that conversation with the art director and say, that's about the game, but there's also your team," unquote. In July, a developer for Naughty Dog's remake of the acclaimed The Last of Us tweeted that the game was their first crunch-free experience in their career, praising changes at the studio. What's next? Hulst's teams have a dizzying set of priorities ahead of them, including delivering games for the early 2023 launch of PSVR 2. They've also got a formidable task to figure out live games and will benefit from the experience of a top studio in that sector, Bungie, which the company recently acquired. In March, Sony's live ops effort with racing game Gran Turismo 7 hit a snag after it had to correct an unpopular update tied to virtual car prices. Quote, "We've got to listen and learn and react quickly. That's what we're learning," unquote. And so, yeah, I mean, I know there was a lot to unpack there, a lot to read, but honestly, like, Hermen Hulst said some really interesting things, and for the most part, I'm pleased with what he's been saying. And obviously the main takeaway from everything Hermen Hulst has said is, the focus on single player games, because obviously that is the core DNA of PlayStation. That is what makes PlayStation so great, is their single player games, like The Last of Us and Horizon and God of War. And I know a lot of PlayStation fans over pretty much the last couple years, ever since the PS5 came out, a lot of PlayStation fans, including myself, have been worried because, there's been all these reports coming out that Sony wants to start getting into the live service space. It's only normal to think like, okay, is Sony gonna like not care about making single player games anymore? Are they gonna put them on the back burner? What if Sony creates a live service game and it's almost as successful as like GTA Online or Fortnite? Would Sony just like put all their eggs in one basket and just invest in that one or two really popular live service game? And I mean, Hermen Hulst has reassured yet again that that's not what they're doing. They're just trying to step out of their comfort zone just a little bit, and they're still keeping their main focus on what they do best, and that's creating phenomenal single player games. They just want to keep doing that, but also try and get into the live service area, which that makes sense for Sony because they're a business, and obviously the most important thing for a business is to make as much money as possible. This wasn't in this article that I just read, but apparently another thing Hermen Hulst said about when it comes to games launching on PC, he said that whenever a PlayStation exclusive game comes out, it will not go to PC until at least a year later, which honestly I feel like it should be at least 2 years, but I mean it could be worse, so at least it's a year. But the only caveat to that is that he said whenever they launch their live service games, so such as The Last of Us Online or this rumored Horizon Online game, those games will launch day and date on the PlayStation as well as PC, which, I mean, that makes a lot of sense because it's an online game. So games like that should come out day and date on PC and not just PlayStation. And as far as like the mobile space, like I don't care at all. I honestly hope that Sony and whatever they create for like the mobile game area, I hope it fails terribly and Sony just looks back and like, you know what? Yeah, mobile isn't for us, and they just completely just ditch it and like focus on something else, because I despise mobile games with a passion. And it also is nice to hear that, Hermen Hulst also spoke more when it comes to crunching, because there has been, especially whenever The Last of Us Part 2 was getting ready to come out, and there was a lot of bad PR coming out from Naughty Dog because they were apparently crunching their employees pretty bad to try and ship the game out whenever they were supposed to. And obviously like crunch is not good at all. But I will stand by this, and this is what I've always felt about crunching when it comes to like game developers. Like it could be a worse job. Like you could be having to crunch and work overtime, like doing roofing in July with no water. Like at least you do get to sit in like a comfortable office, like an office chair with air conditioning. I'm not trying to like undermine that, because I know it's very, very stressful to create something out of nothing and hoping that like the public actually enjoys what you're making. So I'm not trying to like say all that doesn't matter or it's easy, because it's absolutely not easy at all. But I'm just saying like sometimes developers choose to go into the office on Saturdays, and they want to work overtime because they just love what they do. So I'm not defending crunch. I'm just saying that like sometimes sometimes you kind of have to do crunch at least a little bit. But that's with every business, no matter whether it's retail or gaming or whatever it is, that pretty much happens everywhere. But it is nice hearing like developers coming out, even from like Naughty Dog saying like, there was no crunch whatsoever on The Last of Us Part 1, which I've already talked about whenever that news first came out. But that's, that's really good to hear, because Naughty Dog probably got it the worst out of all of Sony's first party studios when it comes to crunch, and it seems like they've completely changed their ways for the better. So that's obviously nice to hear. And honestly, the one thing that got me the most worried in this whole entire article was whenever, apparently Sony is still planning on making PS4 games. And I get it, because Hermen Hulst said they don't want to abandon like the 120 million PS4 users. But at the same time, Sony, like, the PS5 is almost 2 years old. Next month, it'll be the 2-year anniversary. And we already know some games next year are going to be coming out on the PS4. And I don't want to see it. Like, Sony, I know, you're not abandoning your fan base, because all the true fans of PlayStation that, were around during the PS4 life cycle, like, they either already have a PS5 or they want to get a PS5. And as soon as they can get their hands on one, then they would get one, And even though especially with games like Horizon Forbidden West and God of War Ragnarok, at least visually, like, it seems like the PS4 versions isn't really holding the game back too much, but it is at least a little bit, because they're trying to get the same game to work on very old hardware, so it is at least holding the game back just a little bit, and I just really want to see what the PS5 can actually do, like, at the height of its powers, because I feel like next year is probably going to be the peak year for the PS5, especially with something like Spider-Man 2. So I really hope, like, no later than like the first half of next year, that Sony just completely abandons PS4, and everything from that point going on is just PS5 only, and obviously PC. And so yeah, but we'll see when it comes to that. And also he talked a little bit about, PSVR 2 and them trying to get games delivered on time, which honestly, I'm not going to talk too much about this, because I didn't buy the first VR for PlayStation, and I'm not buying PSVR 2. I'm just not a fan of virtual reality. I just prefer gaming on an actual console, so I'm going to be passing on that. Yeah, overall, it just seems like Sony is heading in still like a good direction, like, for us true Sony fans that love PlayStation for what they actually are, by making amazing single player games. It's nice to know that that's what they're focusing on, and they just want to branch out just a little bit to see what maybe, because all Sony wants to do, because apparently, they're making like 12 live service games. All they really need is like 1 or 2 to be very successful, and that's all they care about. Like, they want their own Fortnite, they want their own GTA Online, and I don't think anything they create will be that popular and successful, but if it's like half of that, then I think Sony would be okay with that. And so yeah, guys, I'm going to be very interested to see what you guys have to say about Hermen Hulst's recent comments on the overall state of PlayStation and them going forward. So what do you guys think down below? Let me know your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed it or found it informative, drop it a like and hit the subscribe button by turning on the post notification bell so you don't miss my next upload. Until next time, guys, take care.